Val is the founder and CEO of Content Rules, where she enjoys helping companies solve complex content problems. Val's a well-known expert in content strategy, structured authoring, global content, content development, and terminology management. And her fourth book, The Personalization Paradox, Why Companies Fail and How to Succeed at Creating Personalized Experiences at Scale, which is also the topic of her conversation tonight, or her talk tonight, was published in 2021 by XML Press, and we will be giving away a copy tonight. So we're going to put a link in the chat for a place where you can sign up to, if you'd like to be in the drawing for a copy of Val's book. Val is also on the advisory board for the Technical Communications program at the University of North Texas. And when not working with her customers or students, Val can be found sitting behind her sewing machine, working on her latest quilt. And I have seen some pictures of some of her quilts, and they are fabulous. She also claims to make a mean hummus, so, as do I. So I would be very curious to try her. Anyway, please welcome Val Swisher.
Thanks, Paula, and we'll have to have a cook-off or something.
Yes.
So,
yes,
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Should I share my screen?
You should. And while you're doing that, let me remind people that we are recording this. So be aware of that if you don't want your face on screen at any point. Also, please put your questions for Val in the chat as we go along. Feel free to put your questions there. When Val is done speaking, we'll pull out those and give you a chance to ask them. So, sorry, Val, now, please go ahead.
My video for the moment because I don't want to have any bandwidth issues. So I will turn it back on later. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this evening to talk about the personalization paradox, why companies fail, and how to succeed at delivering personalized experiences at scale. And as Paula just said, the book is out. It was a long time coming, and it's available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If you decide to get it from my website, you get some extra little freebies. So that would be contentrules.com/TPP. All right, so let's get into it. Let's start. So let's start by defining what a personalized experience is to the right person on the right device in the right language or the language of their choice. So in order to be successful delivering personalized experiences, you need to be able to do all these things because that's how you truly personalize the experience that someone is having. This is nothing new. We have been trying to make information easy to find since a stone and a chisel. So way back, Pliny the Elder, back between 23 and 79, wrote this huge tome called The Natural History in 37 Books. And book one was nothing more than a table of contents for the other 36 books. So trying to make information easy to find is something we have been trying forever. You know, indexes, card catalogs, tables of contents, figures, tables, search, everything. We've been trying. And of course, personalized content is a natural outgrowth of this quest to make it easy to find information. The difference, however, is that rather than having people look for that information, what we're trying to do is automatically give them that information, push the correct information to them at the right time, on the right device, in the right language, and all those things. To do this, particularly at scale, relies heavily on automation, and it's going to get easier as AI becomes more ubiquitous. And later on in my presentation, I will talk about AI and how this all intertwines. So most companies say that personalizing a customer experience is a critical must-have, but very few companies believe that they're either doing it enough or doing it well. And in the book, there are the studies and the percentages and all of that. So it's backed up with some actual data. So why is it that we can't seem to figure this out? That so many companies are saying that they're failing, and I think we probably experienced it. I believe that there are 3 reasons that we're not quite doing it right. The first reason, and in my opinion, the most important reason, is that we're looking at the wrong end of the content food chain. We spend a lot of time focusing on the end, the delivery, rather than the content itself, the creation, how we write that content, how we manage that content. We're too focused on the delivery and not focused enough on the creation and management, all those things that are around it. The second problem is the bright, shiny object problem. We keep throwing tools. We throw tools at this problem all the time. And I am here to tell you that if you throw expensive new tools at the same crappy content, you end up with expensive, crappy content. I promise. I've seen it a million times already. So we're not starting from the content and then saying, gee, what tools do I need to take the best advantage of the content and have it do what I need that content to do? Instead, it's like, oh, well, someone decided to buy this, someone decided to buy that, and now we're trying to shoehorn our content into it, and it doesn't work. And of course, we have the same old silos that we've had. I've been talking about them for 30 years. New paradigm, same silos. Okay, so what's the paradox? What is the personalization paradox? The paradox is that if you want to personalize experiences at scale, you must standardize everything about your content. So doing this at scale means you can't possibly create individual pieces of content for every person, right? We need to do this at scale. But to do that, you have to standardize, which is like, well, wait a second. I'm personalizing by standardizing. This really just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And so I was looking for an analogy early on when we were first writing the book. I had a few different ideas, and then it came upon me, the housing analogy. And there are a few different paradigms in housing. At one end of the spectrum, we have personalized custom homes. You pick everything. I can pick 17 different doorknobs if I want. I can pick whatever faucets and tile and whatever it is that I want. It's completely personalized for me. At the way other end of the spectrum are apartment buildings, where it's completely standard, right? Everyone gets the same doorknobs and the same door stops and the same ovens and the same refrigerators. Maybe I have, 2 bedrooms rather than 1, but everything is standardized. And I can do that much less expense and much more quickly on an apartment by apartment basis, right? So just to bring that point as an analogy, we have these 2 ends. And what we need to do is we need to find a balance between something that's completely personal, which takes a lot of time and a lot of money, and something that's completely standardized, which may or may not satisfy someone's needs. We need to find this middle ground. And the housing community, housing developers solved this problem for themselves a long time ago. So I don't know about your neighborhood, but around here, and when I travel, back in the day when we traveled, I noticed that in suburban communities, what was happening was that developers would come in and they'd buy a whole big, chunk of land, and then they'd start building these houses. And you could have maybe, there's like 3 different models, and there's a 2-story and a few 1-stories. And as the buyer, I get to, air quotes, personalize my house, because I get to pick certain things about my house from a subset of options. Don't worry, I'm going to get to content. So I might be able to choose from 3 different faucets, or 2 different countertop types, or 3 different floorings. I can make a personalized experience for myself, but it's drawn from a set of standardized pieces that I am given. So just to sort of bring it home, I do live in the wine country. I do live where there are lots of fires. And 4 years ago, almost to the day, there was a big fire called the Tubbs Fire that came right through where I live. And yes, it's a pun. I intended that. Came right through where I live and burnt down, decimated 5,000 homes. Mine was not among them, miraculously, but everyone around me burnt down. And from here, my house to the highway, it's about 7 miles, and all of it burnt. The whole thing burnt. There's a very fancy neighborhood called Fountain Grove, where there's all these custom multi-million-dollar homes. They're gorgeous. That's on the way to the highway. And then there's one of these neighborhoods where it was just a track neighborhood, and the developers came in and they did exactly this. They bought these different lots, and all of a sudden, all these houses went up. Those, quote, personalized homes were built within a year, and people were in them, occupying them, and they all looked different, and different paint and different shingles and different shutters. And the personalized ones, the custom homes, they're still being built 4 years later. This is the same with content. We need to create personalized experiences that meet a customer's needs. But we need to do this at scale. And the only way to do this at scale is to do it in an efficient way that uses standards. And this is why we have to standardize our content. So herein lies the paradox. In order to create nimble, reusable pieces of content that can be mixed and matched on the fly, combined in different ways for different people and different devices, and meet them where they need to be, you have to standardize everything about that content. You must, because otherwise it's not going to scale. So the only way to do it at scale, again, is we have to have small pieces of content that we can mix and match. And in order to be able to mix and match them and be successful, everything about them needs to be standardized. And there are 5 different, what we call, dimensions of standardization. And I'm going to talk about each one. We'll talk about each one. Output types, words, sentences, paragraphs, and components. And they're a little bit like Russian matryoshka nesting dolls, if you will, particularly words, sentences, paragraphs, and components. Okay. But in order to be successful delivering standardized content, each one of these things has to be standard, or it's not going to work. So the output type delivers determines what content you're going to deliver. And I know I said we need to stop focusing on delivery. But in this day and age, with tools we have today, we do actually have to say, oh, I'm going to deliver a web page that has this intention, or I'm going to deliver emails that have this intention, or in the technical world, I'm going to deliver online help, or I'm going to deliver a knowledge base with multiple articles. So I do need to make sure that if I want to deliver a whole bunch of personalized web pages that show different things on them, I've standardized. Yes, it's Garanimals. And I talk about that. It is Garanimals. It's the ultimate in standardization. It's mix and match Garanimals. Be a lion, be a cheetah, be a pussycat. I don't know, be whatever. But everybody's got it. You got to match them up. So when we think about this, and we compare it to the analogy, the output type is like the floor plan of your house. So it's that structure that creates that consistency and usability. I was looking at a customer's website, doing an audit just yesterday, in fact, and I noticed, I'm looking at it, and I noticed that the layout of the pages, even though the pages all had the same intention, the layout was different. It was so confusing. I was like, can you just please leave like the boxes in the same places so I know where to get something? You got to standardize that output type so I know where everything goes. Then I start talking about what goes into those different outputs. So I'm going to start with the very, very smallest component. So imagine it's the tiniest little Matryoshka doll. That's the words you use. You have to standardize your terminology so that every piece of content you create uses the same word to mean the same thing. Okay, the example I always use, people are really tired of this example, is it a dog? Is it a canine? Is it a hound, a pooch, a snickerdoodle, whatever? What is it? Because if we're all working on this, and I call it a canine, and you call it a dog, and someone else calls it a puppy or whatever, and we try to put our pieces together into one output, nobody's going to know what we're talking about. Gosh, is a canine different than a dog? Why are they using a different word here? So you have to standardize on your terms. Otherwise, people are not going to understand what you're talking about. Fixtures are like that. And what's really interesting, so I've done a lot of remodeling. You can ask Paula. She's like followed along on my remodeling trips here. Did you know there's like 7 billion kinds of faucets for the bathroom? And they all work. They all work. You know why? Because it's standard. The size of the thread and the size of the pipe and all these things. And you can take one of a bazillion types of faucets and put it in your bathroom and it's going to work. So it's very important. And if you know me at all, you know that I'm like a maniac about terminology. Terminology is one of my big soapboxes because terminology leads to comprehension. We want people to comprehend what we're doing. So it's not just the words, but it's also how you use them. So there are rules for plumbing. There are rules for electrical systems. And you know what happens when we don't all follow the rules? I take my hairdryer to Germany and I can't plug it in because we didn't all follow the same rules, right? So we have to also decide Are we coming? Are we going? Are we present tense? Are we future tense? Are we past tense? Are we active voice? Are we passive voice? Are we using contractions? Are we not using contractions? And honestly, I don't care what you do as long as you do the same thing over and over again. Again, I need to mix and match. I don't want to have a situation where I bring my hairdryer to Germany and I can't plug it in, right? I need to have the situation of the faucet where any one of these faucets will work in my bathroom. There's an ANSI standard for that. Did you know that? There's actually an ANSI standard for the plumbing and the threading. Who knew? But it's really important because, again, to scale this, you need to be able to mix and match and mix and match and mix and match. So if you have more than one person doing the writing, you got to agree on what that writing is going to look like, what it's going to read like. Then we get to paragraphs. Paragraphs are very interesting because paragraphs are really where you define your brand. Certainly in long form. It's really where you have tone and voice. A single sentence doesn't really tell you much about tone and voice. And when we use tools to analyze content and we analyze tone and voice, we're analyzing at the paragraph level. And so that's like, are you mid-century modern or are you Shaker arts and crafts? You know, a crystal doorknob probably wouldn't look right in a mid-century modern home. So this is where you get that personality. And we all know that when a brand does it well, it's like magic. Right? So we want to make sure that our voice and our tone are also standardized. Now, will you have a situation where different departments, different silos might have slightly different, voice? Yes, it happens. There are certain departments that may have a more formal voice and other departments that may have a more relaxed voice. But in general, we want to standardize that voice and that tone. And finally, we have the components. The components are those building blocks. A component is an independent unit that can either stand alone by itself or it can be combined with other components in whatever order I need them in for the particular moment of time that this person needs the right content delivered to the right device and the right format and the right language and all the right things. I need to standardize those components because otherwise, when I try to mix and match them, they won't go together. And we think of a component like a room in the house. So all these pieces come together like the biggest Matryoshka doll. The words, right? Make sure I'm using the same words mean the same thing. The rules around those words. It's more important than you think because I have seen lots of content created by different writers try to be smashed together and produced. And you look at it and it's like, this is a mess. No one is going to understand this. This is not going to work. So you need to make sure that every single piece of what you're doing is standardized. And again, it's not that the technology will prevent you from doing this. The technology is perfectly happy to let you do whatever you want. To an extent. It's that your poor customer, your poor user will be either baffled or annoyed or it's not going to be pretty. So once you standardize absolutely everything about your content, then you can take those, you can take those nimble reusable pieces, those components, and you can combine them on the fly in different ways for different people and different devices. And that's how you deliver a personalized experience at scale. I have seen companies try to create different content for every persona. There's no number of personas in the world that are going to allow you to personalize for me. For me, you can't do it one at a time. You have to do it in components that get built out into the thing you want to deliver. It's the only way to scale. You know, Larry, before I go on to the future, if there are any pertinent questions that anyone asked that we want to talk about now, this would be a good time if you want to, or we can leave it to the end.
Yeah, there were one or two. Actually, one in particular, Sophia had a question about terminology.
Yes.
She was curious about when you talked about output types. She was asking, does that equal like a content type or an object type? Did you see that question, or does that make sense?
Yeah. I may not know exactly the context of output type because there's a, content type, because depending on the domain, there are a few different kinds. But in general, I think the answer is yes. So I'd have to get into it a little more to understand exactly what content type means to Sophia, but that's probably the best way to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
there were a couple more, but I think the other questions were like kind of more detailed, and I think they can wait to the end. Although there was one asking about specifically about balancing growth requirements from Paul about tips on delivering personalized experiences while balancing growing requirements to protect user privacy. And I don't know if this is something you might talk about later, or if that's anyhow, if you want to answer that or work that in.
So that is covered in the book. It's not in this presentation, but things like GDPR, it's a problem. It's definitely a problem. I would say that that's more on the delivery side. And when we address that, what we have to look at is, how do we know what a person wants? How did we get that information? Right? Because in order for me to give you a personalized experience, I have to know what you want. And one way is that I can ask you, right? I can ask you to, answer these 4 questions and I'll give you what you want. Another way is I can be programmatically tracking you. And then it gets really creepy. And then it starts butting up against certainly European laws now, and following US is not far behind. So it is something that you really have to consider on the delivery side when you're making that decision of what content am I going to show this person. I'll give you another example. It's not a marketing example. It's not really a technical example either, but I think it proves the point. Let's just say that I want to change the battery in the key fob of my 2016 Honda Fit, because this happened to me. I want to change the battery in the key fob of my 2016 Honda Fit, and I'm not picking on Honda. I love Honda. Well, Honda already knows what car I've bought. They know everything about that car. They know the VIN, so they know the year. They know me because I bought the car. So if I go to Honda and I'm in the site and I say, I need to change the battery on my key fob, I need those instructions. Well, You don't have to ask me what car I have. You could just give me the instructions for the 2016, I'm in the 1900s here, the 2016 Honda Fit, because that's the car I have. I'm in the support site. So that's, am I allowed to use that information when I personalize content for someone? I don't have the answer to that. That's something that I really actually would talk to an attorney about. But you either are, if you ask someone for the information, then you can use it, right? You've asked them, you can use it. If you follow them around and just watch what they're doing clandestinely, you can't do that. That doesn't work. Then there's this middle ground where, gosh, you already know something about me, right? You know a lot about me. You probably even know if I financed how much money I make. I mean, you know too much about me. Can you act on that information? That is absolutely a question. I don't really have the answer, and it would be like beyond my pay grade to offer it. But those are the things that you need to be thinking about. So hopefully that helps.
So let me, there's actually a couple of these others that I look at them more closely. I think they're good to address now before we move on.
Sure.
Rolf was asking about, he said that the 5 dimensions of standardization remind him a bit of Brad Frost's atomic design. Are you familiar with that?
Say it again?
Brad Frost's atomic design.
I am not familiar with that. I apologize.
Oh, that's a book pretty common well-known in the UX world, I think.
Sorry.
But and he's talking about design just in the context of content instead of a design system. Okay. Anyhow, so sort of the same principle, that nesting doll principle, but in a different context.
I'd love to have a further conversation about that, because that's not something that's in my domain of knowledge, and find out a little more about what that is and see whether it matches up well to what I'm talking about here. So I apologize about not knowing.
Well, maybe we can get a little conversation about that going in the Slack channel. Just one thought, because I would personally love to hear more about that. Because, but another one, John had a really interesting question too about John was curious about the paragraph being where the company voice and tone is defined. He says it seems like the sentence level is where the tone and voice come to life. And John, if you want to chime in, because I know it was a pretty long question. John, if you want to unmute and elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get the picture that the long form is where it really takes shape, but I used your metaphor of the house, like a mid-century modern style sink versus a farmhouse sink. You're going to start to see that kitchen is probably one or the other of those styles based on that sink. And I liken the sink to the sentence. So like, yeah, I was reading the book and I saw that, and I wrote a note there, like, I'm not sure I understand this.
It's a good question. What I have found in analyzing content, whether it's using my human eye or using a tool, is that a single sentence doesn't necessarily give me enough information about what that voice is or what that tone is. I really need to look at a bunch of sentences to get it. And yes, long form content is more in line with this thought, because it's not like it's the tagline. It's really when I have multiple sentences, how do I really get that feel? And all of the tools that I work with analyze tone, not from one sentence, but from a combination of sentences. It could just be 2 sentences. So I agree that there's plenty of voice that you can have in a single sentence. I mean, if you're using third person and no contractions, and you're all buttoned up, and you've got that NASA pocket protector in your shirt, that's you can see it, you can feel it in that one sentence. So I think a combination of sentences gives you more information about it. So that may or may not satisfy you, but that's my thought process along those lines. We also look for different things when we do that. I mean, it's a whole other story. So it's a different meetup.
And there's one more question I'd love to get to before we move on. Chris asks, where do you consider metadata in the mix? Assuming that tagging is where these content elements will be able to programmatically come together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's in the book as well. Metadata is obviously very important. This is also where the size of your chunk comes in. Because one of the issues that we have with metadata is that depending upon the type of files we're working with, I can either get super granular as to where that metadata lands, or I have to be not granular enough. So in the technical world, which is really where my background is, if we're talking about small topics, I can be much more granular with my tagging, so that when I output and I have all of my search results, I can get not just to the file that someone wants, but I can actually get further into the structure as to where someone wants. So it's a matter of having robust metadata, and it's a matter of having a structure that supports tagging at a much more granular level. It's very important, and there's more detail about it, but without a doubt, it's interesting because in the next section, AI isn't going to care at all. AI, the whole metadata thing goes away with AI. But in today's world, with the tools that we're currently using, that's what we're keying off of. We're keying off of metadata to know what to serve up to somebody. So it plays a critical role. And it's a great question.
Well, good. Well, I'll queue up the rest of the questions
Sure.
For the next break or when you wrap up. But thanks.
Sure. Yeah. Great. Happy to. It's actually more fun to do it this way than when you save everything for the end and all that. Okay. All right. So what about AI? What about the future? So I have to tell you that I have spent a lot of time studying this. And I recently took a very interesting class at the University of California, Berkeley, Haas School of Management on AI and business. And it's a publicly offered class that I strongly recommend to anyone who's really looking at AI and its effects on business. So personalization is going to change when we're all using AI. So there are complex algorithms that form artificial neural networks that will determine the content somebody needs. So it's not going to be based on the metadata that we think somebody needs. It's going to be based on very complex algorithms. And in fact, the algorithms are explained in the book to determine what you need. And it starts by doing it on a percentage basis. The AI engine basically says, based on everything I know, this information, I have 65% confidence that that's what this person's looking for. Or I only have 35% confidence that this is what this person's looking for. And over time, we have machine learning that's actually looking at both you and the information it has and whether or not the confidence level of that match grows. So machine learning is already understanding more and more about us and will continue to do so. One of the keys of having some type of cognitive system, at least front-ending all of your other systems, is that it is able to aggregate content from all of your sources. it's not stuck with, oh, well, this is, in my DAM and that's in my, headless web, and it doesn't care. It can aggregate content from anything. It can deliver content in whatever format someone wants. And it can actually create content, or it will be able to. I mean, they're doing natural language generation now. It's, in my opinion, still primitive. The best natural language generation is really around things that are very standardized, like real estate listings, right? It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, this many square feet. So I can almost feed in a spreadsheet and it can create the content from it, or like baseball scores or that sort of thing. But it's really going to change the fundamental way that information is requested and information is provided. But we need to start preparing for AI now. And I've been saying this, I don't know how many years I've been saying we need to start preparing. We really do, because it's we're using it. We're not using it to its fullest capacity, but it's been at least 5 years that I've been saying we need to prepare for this. One of the things that you can do is structure your content in the ways that we're talking about. Structured content is much easier for an AI system to use for learning, right? Because a system doesn't come knowing anything. You have to train it. And it's most easily trained on structured content, and in particular, structured content and question and answer pairs, because you need to tell the AI system what the right answer is before it can figure out what the right answer is. It doesn't come automatically knowing what the right answer is. So you have to spend a lot of time teaching it. And then it continues to learn more and more and more based on what you started out with. One of the things that I really think we need to do now is curate our content. We really need to get rid of the garbage, the stuff that's old. We just did a project for a huge company in the finance arena where they asked us to come in and help them get rid of website pages that they didn't need anymore. Thousands and thousands of website pages. And Paula, I don't know where your tool was, but I didn't have it. That was a problem. But thousands and thousands of website pages. And we had to have criteria. When you curate your content, it's not a simple task. This is why we don't do it, because it's not a simple task. If it was easy, we wouldn't have to do it, because we'd just be doing it all along. So you're going to have to curate your content either before you put all of it into, yes, it's more appealing than governance. Yes, governance is what happens after you curate it. So we're going to have to get all of that content into the AI system. And you can either curate it before or after you put it in there. But if you don't have a cognitive system yet, then curate it now, because you undoubtedly have content that people have lost track of, and you don't even know what you don't even know. And you don't want that junk in your AI system, because you don't want the AI system to come back and say, oh, well, this piece of content, which happens to be, 12 years old and no good anymore, I have a 52% likelihood that this is going to answer this person's question. Oh, no. So curate your content. If you want to go beyond that, structure the content. And then if you want to go beyond that, start creating your question and answer pairs, because that's how you're going to train it, with simple questions and answers. And you're going to have a lot of them, and then it will take off on its own. So if you structure your content, it makes it easier for people and machines to analyze it. And it makes the content way friendlier to the machines. But it also gives you a way to really focus on what's important and what's not. So the whole act of structuring your content forces you to curate your content because you're working with all this content. You're working with a corpus. You're going to get better results if you curate it now. So there's different ways to do it. And, I'm sure other people have other ways. In my mind, I usually suggest that we start by making 3 different buckets of content. The content that we know, yes, this is good, we need this, it's pertinent, it's accurate, right? It's everything we need. Then there's the bucket that's like, oh my God, I can't believe we still have this. It has all these mistakes. It's completely out of date. There's nothing we can do to fix it. So we have both ends of the spectrum. And then there's this big, massive chunk in between that's like, well, I kind of need to fix this. It's a little inaccurate. It's not quite right anymore, but I don't want to throw it out. And then, of course, you have your work to do on fixing that bucket. So that's what I usually do. I'm sure other people have other ways to do it, but that's my methodology. So again, question and answer pairs, that's how we start training the machine. And they're simple, 1 sentence, 1 answer, right? And it just so happens that if you do this with technical content today, you have a really good chatbot. So that's just, one of the things that comes out of it is that if you've got technical content and you start creating these very simple questions and answers, then all of a sudden you have some really nice, simple content for a chatbot. All right, so chunk your content, structure it into small pieces, and then standardize everything about it. Then you'll be able to put these pieces together and deliver an experience that's the right content to the right person at the right time on the right device. And I didn't even go into the effects of this on translation, but translation gets a whole lot better also. And of course, we're going to prepare in the future. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is me. You already know who I am. I wrote a book. I wrote 4 books, actually. But I do believe that content should be easy to read, efficient to create, and cost-effective to translate. You can find out all about my company. We've been around like from time beginning. We've worked with lots of customers on lots of projects. We do all these things. And you can find it at contentrules.com. We've got like the best customers on the planet. I love my customers. So they're all over the place, hundreds of customers. There's the book. Even Joe Polizzi gave me a quote. That was very nice of him. Rob Rose wrote the foreword too. All right, there we are. You've got it. You know everything now. Now you know everything.
Thanks, Val. That was amazing.
Right.
And we do have a number of questions. So let's
okay.
Let me go back to my list here.
Right.
So yeah, gosh, we've been going a while here. This is great. So Melinda asked, let me get back to the question because I want to read it correctly. Melinda asked, what kind of content is best to personalize in your opinion? Are there certain types or pieces of info that customers are wanting or expecting to be personalized?
Oh, that's a tough one. I really think it depends on your company and what it is your company does and what it is, what your relationship is with your customer and who your customer is. Are you B2B? Are you B2C? I really think it depends. There are certain types of content that I think are easier to standardize than others. For sure, technical content is much easier to standardize than marketing content, without a doubt. And in fact, the easiest thing to standardize are instructions on how to do something. That's really easy to standardize and should be standardized. But beyond that, it's kind of hard for me to say. It really depends on your company and what you're doing and who your customers are. Sorry.
And Eric had a question. Do these standardizations go top down? Is this and Eric, if you want to unmute and elaborate on that, it was a pretty short question.
Well, I guess, you know, you were already elaborating it kind of after I had typed that, which is if you're looking at things in terms of like the collective, and then you're talking about, you know, looking at a sum of a couple of sentences to make your decision point about what the paragraph should be. And then that will enable you to look down at what like the sentence level should fit to that. That's what I'm getting at, is that it looks like it's a top-down kind of analysis here of your standardizations.
It's really funny you should ask this, because we really struggled with this. Is it top down or bottom up? Am I going from the biggest to the smallest to the smallest to the biggest? We really struggled with it, and I can make a case for either way. And we actually rewrote the book 3 times because we kept going back and forth and back and forth. So what I ended up with was it's all important. So whether you start from the big and go to the small, or start from the small and go to the big, you still have to do all of it. But I could absolutely make a case for either way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess it just seems from your analogy, right, that you're going to use in this presentation, that it would be top down because you're thinking of it just of the way you're presenting it. But I definitely can make the case for both ways as well. Yeah. So I was just seeing how in your mind you were thinking of this.
In my mind, I'm so confused because I could see it both ways. And I mean, really, it was an editorial nightmare because we kept flipping it back and forth. So it's a great question. And again, both ways. So.
You know, right about at that point in the presentation, there were a couple of other comments, and these aren't really phrased as questions, but I just want to throw them out there just because they kind of add to what he was just talking about. Kate says, so a sentence is a signal, but maybe not enough data to make a whole judgment about voice. I think this is when you were talking about that. She made that comment. And then Jeremiah made the point, I think voice and tone is definitely present at the sentence level, but manifests definitively when grouped, for example, in a paragraph. Different voice and tone in multiple sentences equals confusion at the paragraph level for sure. So
yeah, absolutely. And I love that. I think that that's a great way to put it, that, you know, I should have thought of. That's a great way to put it. If I don't standardize my sentences and I do put them together, I could just totally confuse everyone in terms of voice and tone. So yes, I think you can see it in a sentence and it manifests more in multiple sentences. Yes, I love that. Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
And then Heidi had a question, more down in the weeds kind of question. And can you share some of the tools that you work with?
Sure. Well, I know someone mentioned Acrolinks, and you know, we've been the Acrolink services provider for almost 16 years now. So we work with Acrolinks a lot. We also work with Congri, which is a competitor to Acrolinks. We've been doing a lot of work with a tool called Harmonizer, which is from Data Conversion Labs. We've been doing more. It's very interesting. Now we're starting to see about using semantic AI tools for this work. So a tool like Semaphore by SmartLogic, we're in the middle of a test with them, so I can't say, oh, it's going to work. It's going to be great. But so far, it looks very, very interesting. It's all a matter of being able to do an analysis at different levels of the content. And I know these are not the same kind of tools. There's other kinds of tools like that big the big finance company project, they were way more, they weren't internal content audit tools. I'm really talking about the content audit tools that we use. So those are a few of them. I would imagine a tool like Pool Party could be used, but I don't have a personal experience with it other than everybody saying it's great and I believe them. So yeah, those are the ones. I'm trying to think if there are others. There might be a couple of others that I'm forgetting at the moment, but those are some of the ones that we use.
Cool, thanks. And Rolf had another really interesting question about the machine learning part of this. He asked, how intensive are those machine learning operations computation-wise? In case you're trying to provide a personalized experience on a website with a high visitor count, I imagine the load CPU-wise for the web servers could be quite high. So can you talk a little bit about the technical part of the machine learning implementation?
Yeah, so one of the reasons, so there are two reasons why we can do AI now. One is that cognitive systems have crazy fast processors and lots of them. That all came from the graphic card development from video games, believe it or not. So it's not the cognitive system that's going to choke. It takes a lot to choke a cognitive system. The web servers out there depend, how we actually communicate with our customers, that will choke long before the processor that's getting the information and managing it will choke. And just so I finish it out, fast processing was one reason and big data was the other. Once we got to the point of having data warehouses, big, huge quantities of data, and super fast processors. If you look at the history of AI, we've been trying for decades. And it's sort of ebbed and flowed and ebbed and flowed. And then in the past 10 years, it's just like shot off. And every year that we go now is like 5 to 10 years of development. It's, if you're from Boston, it's wicked fast. It's really fast. But machine learning, I have yet to see a presentation, read an article, attend anything that has come close to saying that the cognitive systems are going to run out of processing power. Could it happen in the future? I suppose it could. I'll just give you this one little anecdote. So in 2012, on Jeopardy, and let's not talk about the host, we won't go there, but on Jeopardy, IBM Watson won Jeopardy. And you couldn't beat Watson. And actually, you couldn't beat Watson. I'm wondering if anyone knows, what did Watson use as its corpus of information that it was trained on? Because once you know this, then you'll know there's no possible way to beat it. I'll tell you, they put all of Wikipedia into Watson. The whole shebang. Is some of it junk? Yes, some of it's junk. But if you think about Jeopardy, the kinds of questions they ask or answer, it's all in Wikipedia. And that's why Watson never got a wrong answer, was always fast. So, it's going to take a lot to choke one of these systems. And they just keep getting better and better too. So.
Yeah, I actually had a question about that when you were talking about in the AI and machine learning world, they talk about the human in the loop. Can content curation be thought of as the human in the loop part of this? Is that
1 bazillion%? You, again, these systems come knowing nothing. So the onus is on us that understand the subject matter to curate it, so that it knows this is a good answer, this is a bad answer. And if we never give it the bad answers, then all the answers are good, and now it's deciding between things that are accurate. I will say this, if you don't curate and you just throw everything in there, eventually all the garbage will filter to the bottom. because as it promotes and it says, oh, I think that this is the right answer with a 35% or a 55%, assurance, and someone says, oh, no, that's not the right answer, then it goes back into the pile. Eventually, the incorrect information filters to the bottom. The problem is, how long is eventually? I can't tell you. It depends on your corpus and how bad it is and how much you put in there. So people are definitely needed to curate this content and to train it. People have to train it. It can't train itself.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, Kate had a question, and Kate, if you want to unmute and elaborate on this, she asked, because I can't remember the exact context where this came up, but she asked, is there a difference between inaccurate and not accurate?
It was a snarky question.
Okay.
The two buckets of the fix or ditch or retire. And in one column you had inaccurate, and in one column you had not accurate. So I was just a cheeky question about if there was a difference, or if there is indeed a difference or not.
It's the human error.
Okay.
If I was, Watson, then I wouldn't have that error. I actually don't know which slide you're talking about, but I will go look for it and fix that. Sorry.
Next question is from, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, Vishal. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Question, how has anyone here used or is using AI for use cases such as chatbots, recommendations for users, surfacing user feedback based problem areas to content strategists? Curious to hear your experiences, wins, challenges, suggestions.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that the most popular use that I have seen, so remember where I'm coming from, is using AI, artificial neural networks, for serving up. It could be chatbot information. It doesn't really matter what the delivery type is. It's serving up support information. And if you think about it, support information really is fairly straightforward to work with, because I have a question, I have an answer. It's usually, this is right, this is wrong. There's very little gray area usually in support information. And I was involved with an IBM Watson cognitive system deployment of a chatbot. With COVID, I'm getting my years all confused. I don't think it was 2021. 2020 might have happened, might not have, but in the past couple of years. And it was fascinating. It was very successful. I can't tell you who it is, but it was a very large hardware company. And we started with 600 question and answer pairs. And they uploaded all the technical information, the whole corpus. And then we started training it with about 600 questions and answers. And then we added more. And I think at one point it was like 3,000. And then they let it loose. And it wasn't brilliant out the gate, obviously. But it was like, well, look at this. This thing really works. Who knew? Wow, look at that. Was it a big effort to make it happen? Yeah, it was not a small effort. It was not. Someone had to write all those questions and answers. Well, the answers were there. Someone had to find all the answers and write the questions, right? What would a user ask? And we could go back through the support history and all of this, but it was a big manual effort to train the engine, and it was very, very exciting. It was. I don't know why we were all surprised. IBM's there. They're like, "We told you this was going to work," and we're like, "Wow, look at that! Did you see that?" So anyway, that's my most recent experience.
Well, I have a quick follow-up on that. If support content is kind of the easiest or simplest use case, what would be like the hard use case that we'll kind of know we've arrived when we're dealing with it well?
Wow.
Sorry.
No one's ever asked me this. I've never actually thought about this before. Well, let's think about that for a second. It's got to be, gosh, we've made so many strides in, visual recognition and audio recognition. And Larry, you've stumped me.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
No, it's a great question. I just never thought about it. How do we know when we've arrived? I'm going to have to give it some thought and maybe ask a few of my AI buddies what they think, because every time I think, oh, they're never going to be able to do this, it's like, oh, they did that. How is that possible? You know what? I think it's going to be around creativity. I think it's going to be around the arts. Can an AI system, it has made music already, but is it, I haven't heard it, is it pleasant music, or is it programmatic? It's going to be in that real emotional, artistic, that's my prediction, just thinking through all the kinds of content. So we'll meet again in 3 years and we'll look at that. Was she even close? I don't know.
Thanks for indulging me on that. Hey, let me go closer to Earth again. We'll go back. Sophia had a question about she had a question about relationships and recommendations. And she says, when I think of personalization, I think of instances of objects being delivered to me. You're looking at this event. Here are some other events that you might like, or you've been to these events. You might enjoy this article event. Kind of cross-linked recommendations. Any thoughts on that? Or
yeah, I think that's a perfect example. So what I'm saying is, if you want to do that, let's just again, these are great questions. You're really getting me tonight. It's also, 12 hours of working. But let's just say that we were looking at a date. So here's all the things you can do on October 15th. Is that Sunday, Saturday, whatever? Here's all the things you can do.
That's Friday. It's my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday, Sophia. Here's all the things you can do on Sophia's birthday. If I just had it all in one big article, and Sophia, you're looking for what you want to do on your birthday. Well, how am I going to show you only the things that are interesting to you? I can't.
Okay.
Right? I can't. If I say, oh, here's wine tasting, because I'm in the wine country, right? Here's cheese tasting. Here's riding a horse. Here's putt-putt golf, whatever. If it's split out, and whoever said metadata tagged right now, and I know it's your birthday, and I know that you are the putt-putt golf champion, I'm showing you the putt-putt golf tournament. Done deal. It was a great example.
And this is, he didn't phrase it as a question, but Jay made a comment in the chat that's kind of in the same ballpark, talking about that fortunately or unfortunately, companies like Google and Facebook have invested a lot in optimizing analysis of people's activities in near real time. So probably relevant thing to note is that people tend to be predictable relative to behavior models that don't need to be that precise. But they say that this is also why machine learning fails so much, because people, it always depends on people at some point. Anyhow, but it seems like the first part of that there's some predictability or patterns in human behavior that you can tailor to. Is that?
So I'm sure there are. But here's the thing, and it's the point I make in the book. I am very anti-persona. I am very anti-customer journey. I am very anti all of this stuff because it's not me. You're stereotyping me. Do you know that I have tattoos all over my body? No, because my stereotype as a 50-year-old woman who's, 5'1", who's Jewish, we don't do that. So which happens to be me, but I have tattoos everywhere. So it's like it bothers me on a visceral level that we think we can pigeonhole people into boxes, and we can't, and we shouldn't, and we're not doing ourselves any favors by doing that. We're just not. And we could argue about it all day, because I know people feel very strongly about their personas. And I've developed lots of personas. And I'm giving you a name, and I'm giving you a picture, and this is just bullshit. Why am I doing this? What if you have tattoos? Does that change what I think about you? So anyway, it don't work for me. And now I have tattoos, lots of them.
Nice. Wait, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through. There's a whole flurry of stuff.
Well, we've got Philip Glass, and I do have to tell you, as a music major, as someone who went to the New England Conservatory, I can't stand his music, and a computer could do better than him. I've said it. I walked out of a Philip Glass concert. I'm like, I can open a piano and bang on it just as well as he does. So.
I'm gonna interrupt. I'm gonna assert my privilege and jump in with a question that I want to ask, which is way different than talking about AI and all this fun stuff that's happening in the chat. And this will be very self-serving. But say an organization is planning to do a personalization effort, and they want to start with doing a content audit. What things would you suggest? What criteria would you suggest that people look for in their content that are going to be either usable or problems or, opportunities, if they are wanting to move into doing standardization and personalization?
It's a good question. So when I do this, the first thing that I'm starting with is the unit when I'm auditing. What is the unit of information? Because I can't go any further if my unit is too big. So if I have putt-putt golf and the wine tasting and the horse riding and all of this, it doesn't matter what I've written. I'm stuck there. I can't show Sophia just the putt-putt golf. So that's where I start. I start with what is the appropriate unit. I'm working with a customer right now that's it's a fast food restaurant. And we're working on all of the instructions for the people who have to, make the French fries and fry to this and clean and all this. And they keep using this one box that says, important. And it always says the same thing. And I keep thinking, should that be its own unit? Because is it going to get in my way? So they have this, then they have these other units. And I'm like, where do I divide this up? Because right now, everything's at the page level. And I'm like, this page level is a disaster. We've told people how to flip a towel 25 different ways, 102 times. I can't personalize that. And I can't translate that into 35 languages without a disaster. So start at the unit. Once I'm past the unit, then I really start looking at the standardization. I naturally go to the terminology because that's just me. Because if I'm calling it a burger and you're calling it a hamburger and the other person's calling it, I don't know, a Whopper, I know it's not Burger King, I'm making that up, then I'm not quite sure where to go next. So I start from the unit and then I go deep. So if that's helpful. Is that helpful? Okay. All right.
Hey, let me, John had another question, which really, he says, I get the anti-persona, anti-user journey sentiment. How do you guide a stakeholder through that? There's a lot of desire to have that to guide content modeling instead of just looking at the meaning built into the content. How do you handle that?
Well, sometimes I show them my tattoos, but I can do that because I'm a consultant. You couldn't do that because you could get fired, maybe. It's a good question, and I shouldn't make light of it. It's very difficult, but what we need to get to is the explanation that a persona is not a person. And if we truly want to personalize content for a user, then writing to a persona isn't the way to go, because I'm going to miss a lot of people, and or I'm going to give them a lot of misinformation, or not misinformation, but information that they don't care about. So I'm going to frustrate them. I might insult somebody, right? I understand why we've tried to have units of people types or units of places where someone is on their journey, units of person. We've tried to have units of person so that we can personalize to the unit of person. But the technology exists now to do better. The technology to do better didn't necessarily exist 8 years ago, 9 years ago. The technology exists to do better. And if we truly are determined to provide personalized experiences like the senior management said we should, then we need to be able to provide personalized experiences. So I often will show examples of it's usually imagery that I can find more than anything else. That's like, look at what would come up for this persona, but it's not going to, just to try to, it depends on the customer, right? But if I can find a persona and information that's towards that persona, and then examples of how, well, that persona shouldn't get that information because look at Joe and Tom and Sally, or the other way around. Joe and Tom and Sally don't meet your persona, but they need this information. And that's usually the way you can get them. So I didn't give them what they needed because they didn't meet your made up stereotype of, he wears a scarf and he's 35 and he's got 2 kids. And the whole thing boggles my mind. It's beyond me.
There's a little bit of a follow-up to that in the chat too. Again, Rolf didn't phrase this as a question, but he says, I like Indy Young's approach in that regard to this. She uses and propagates thinking styles instead of personas. She describes the difference to personas as and Rolf, correct me if I get the math wrong here, but thinking styles equal personas minus demography.
Personas minus
the demographic characteristics, and Rolf, can you, if you want to elaborate on that? I don't know. I know some of Indy Young's work, but I'm not familiar with that.
With demographics, I just meant with a persona, you have a woman, 36 years old, single mom, liking coffee, for example. And that part is taken out, and she's going beneath the surface and trying to find out in listening sessions what the driving factors are actually. So basically the survival strategies from a psychology standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, maybe there's another perspective that Jay put in the chat. Also, seeing a lot of personalization that's targeted at roles rather than personas or people. It's less personalization and just a different view, often chosen in an opaque way. And Jay, if you want to elaborate on that, feel free to unmute.
Yeah, we were just debating it over here because Anastasia works on something where they use the word personalization to mean different views and different things. And I think it's just, there are things that are more targeted to different people doing different functions or in different capacities, and it's not really personalized. It's just there's some other information used to create. I think long ago we used to just call it more contextual information, right? Like we're contextualizing the information, we're not personalizing it.
Yeah. So for both comments, I'm not saying that we shouldn't write that information, but we shouldn't call it personalized content. To me, if you want to do personalized content, do personalized content. If you're going to write to whether it's a psychological profile or a demographic profile, whatever profile, if you're going to write to a profile of any type, that's fine. But don't think that that's personalization, because it's not. That's putting me in a box, and you're writing to that box. And if I fit that box, whether it's a psychological box or, an age box, a race box, a gender box, well, okay. But that's not personalization. You don't know me that well. And if you do know me that well, then give me what I want, not what the box wants. So if you're going to do it, that's fine. But let's make sure we all understand what we're doing. We're writing to some type of standardized person. And we all just have to accept that. But we shouldn't call that personalization and pat ourselves on the back.
Great. Well, on that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, Paul, I wanted to see if we had time for one last question, but I know you've been good about wrapping up on the half hour.
Yeah, I think we got people. We're losing people in other time zones, and I think even in this time zone, we're all getting a little tired. But I would like to thank Val. I think that's a great note to sort of wrap up on there. And kind of the difference between personas and personalization and
touched a button. Someone touched the button. Button. Touch the button. Careful. This was so much fun. I really enjoyed being able to speak with everybody. I so appreciate everybody's questions and comments. It really was one of the more fun conversations I've gotten to have on the topic. So thank you so much for having me.
And to anyone who put their name in for a copy of the book, we'll do a little random number generating drawing later, and I will reach out to you via email and let you know that you've won and ask where to send it to you. And Val, did you want to quickly throw up sorry, I didn't prepare you for this, but if you want to throw up your slide again with your contact info, please feel free.
Sure. Now you can see my whole desktop. Here's my, because I didn't, here we are from current slide. Here I am. It's vals@contentrules.com. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, Val Swisher. Would love to connect with all of you. This really was so enjoyable, and I really thank you for engaging with me so much. So.
Great. Thank you. I see someone's asking about the link to the form again. I will pull up that. Oops.
Well, I've got it. I'm just dropping.
Can you?
It. Yeah,
okay.
I just dropped it in for you, Paul.
Great.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, and hope to see you here next month for our November event. Thanks again, Val. This was really terrific.
Thank you, guys. I really enjoyed it. Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much, Val. And everybody, if you're waiting on that link, I'll keep the Zoom open for a couple minutes so people can go in the chat and find the book giveaway link. So.